Last night I was scrolling through my emails and I noticed an email through someone who told me that they lived in the same town as Keirsten and Brady. So this is what this person alleged. They said, "Hey Amber, I live in the same small town as these two, West Plains, Missouri. Keirsten is nothing but a drama queen. She thrives off of it. And I've attached a news article from a few years ago with an ex of hers. Her jumping on the hood of the car he was driving and him firing a weapon at her. The whole time Brady has been locked up, she was sleeping with multiple men. Need names?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, send me the names. I need the tea." And so I'm waiting for an email back, and if they do email me back, I'll definitely let you guys know. But they claim Brady may have been talking to other women, but she was messing with other men. And then they sent me this link to this article. So this is Keirsten's ex, and after she broke up with this ex allegedly showed up and kidnapped Keirsten, and a lot went down. So let's get into this article. Shout out to the Howell County News for posting this article, but this is Jesse Morgan, Keirsten's ex. He was 28 years old at the time, back in March of 2023, and he was facing a battery felony charges, including kidnapping and assault, after an incident that went down on March 7th of 2023 with Keirsten. A sheriff ended up responding to this incident after they ended up getting this 911 call reporting a traffic accident, a domestic disturbance, and somebody shooting a firearm. So the sheriff shows up, and when he arrives on the scene, he spoke to the person who ended up calling 911, and this party and the female victim, which was Keirsten, who was a former significant other of Jesse Morgan, had been driving on this road when they met with Jesse Morgan. Keirsten claims that she was driving down the road and Jesse suddenly intentionally swerved into her car, collided with her driver's side. They got in this car crash, and afterwards Keirsten ended up jumping out of her vehicle with the intention of taking possession of her own car from Morgan, because the car that he had swerved into Keirsten was a car that he had stolen from Keirsten allegedly. So Keirsten tried to get her vehicle back, and I guess when she did, this guy Jesse ended up pressing on the gas and started driving towards Keirsten, to the point that Keirsten had to jump on the hood of the car to avoid being hit by Jesse. So Jesse ended up driving off with the victim while Keirsten was clinging for dear life onto the hood of the car, and he's speeding down the road with her on the hood. It was a chaotic scene. The witness that ended up calling 911 said that they heard Keirsten screaming down the road while she's sitting there clinging onto the hood, and then they heard gunshots, and then they heard Keirsten screaming again. So the sheriff ended up taking a witness statement from the person who witnessed all this, and Keirsten, while she was at her residence and in the city of West Plains, and the West Plains Police Department officers ended up taking her ex-boyfriend Jesse into custody. So Keirsten was really distraught and shaking once the police officers were talking to her. While she was talking to the police officers, she had a full-blown panic attack. She was having a really hard time talking to the officers and talking clearly to them. And when she could finally make a statement, she said that her ex Jesse drove an unknown distance with her on the hood of the vehicle before she ended up driving off because she feared for her safety. And then she claimed after she jumped off the vehicle, he then stopped the vehicle, pulled out a handgun, and he ended up shooting the handgun at her once, and she freaked out. She tried to seek cover behind the car, and he fired 2 more rounds, and he said that he intended to try to take her life. Keirsten said that she tried to re-enter her vehicle and lock the doors, but Jesse was back in the car before she could engage the locks, and he drove towards West Plains, eventually arriving at his own house, and the investigating officers found 9mm casings in the roadway near the scene of the shooting, but they did not locate the handgun when they were searching this Jesse guy's house. And in an interview with police, Jesse denied firing a gun at the victim, but he ended up cooperating with the police, and he corroborated the story of driving off with Keirsten on the hood of his car. So the prosecuting attorney's office charged Morgan with 6 felonies. He was charged with first-degree attempted domestic assault, second-degree kidnapping, unlawful possession of a firearm, armed criminal action, unlawful use of a weapon, and first-degree property damage and he was arrested, and he remained on a $100,000 bond, and I'm sure he definitely had to get some prison time from those charges, and I'm sure she has some major PTSD after dealing with that. I mean, no wonder she said that she had some chaotic relationships in the past. She's lucky as hell he didn't end up shooting her, because that could have ended up turning into a very deadly situation quick, and I'm very curious what started all those, the whole fight where he decided to take her car and drive off with her in the car. They were ex-boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, so it sounded like they were trying to go their separate ways, and maybe he was unhappy with that. I don't know. There's no doubt Keirsten's ex, Jesse, is a huge troublemaker, because I tried to go and do some research to see if I could find like what he was sentenced to, and all I could find was he was on probation from some felony convictions in 2024. I found this article that said a West Plains man on probation for previous felony convictions has been arrested on charges of unlawful possession of a firearm, unlawful use of a weapon, and possession of a controlled substance, all felonies. And this was a year later after the incident, so it sounds like he didn't get any prison time. It sounds like he just potentially got probation. So when he did this incident with Keirsten, he was 29, and now he's 30, and he ended up getting arrested after, I guess, this officer pulled up and he saw this Chevrolet pickup truck with no registration that failed to signal a left turn onto this street. So the officer decided to conduct a traffic stop, and when they identified Jesse Morgan as the driver, they found out that he had a revoked driver's license. So the officer reported that Jesse was not able to provide any proof of insurance for his vehicle, since he obviously had a revoked driver's license. So they ended up towing the vehicle, and during an inventory of the contents, I guess they ended up finding a firearms pistol. You know what they should have did is took that firearm pistol and seen if it was the same one that shot the bullets towards Keirsten that they found the 9mm casings of. But they found this pistol, and they found a glass smoking device with a white crystalline substance on it that ended up testing positive for meth. And Morgan, at that point, was a convicted felony, so he was barred from possessing a firearm. And in 2018, Jesse was sentenced to 4 years in prison after pleading guilty to resisting an arrest for a felony after an officer tried to conduct a traffic stop because he had an active probation warrant at the time. He had this probation violation warrant from this 2014 conviction of first-degree child endangerment, which was a felony. And during this incident with the officer, when he tried to pull over Jesse, I guess Jesse decided to take off with his vehicle, and he ended up dragging this officer as this officer was holding on for dear life onto his vehicle. He ends up dragging this officer down the street as he sped off, and eventually, I guess they ended up catching up with him the next day. I guess the officer was able to free himself, and they ended up arresting him the next day at his home, or at somebody's home, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison on the probation violation relating to the child endangerment conviction. And around the same time, he was sentenced for resisting arrest in 2018. And then in January 2020, he was charged with 1 count of stealing $25,000 or more and 2 counts of stealing $750 or more after he stole a 28-foot-long trailer from a farm. And then he ended up stealing multiple chainsaws from somebody's house and a loader tractor that was worth $31,000 from another farm. So he ended up pleading guilty to 1 count of stealing $25,000 or more in November 2021. And then a few years later is when he had that incident with Keirsten. So at this point, they just need to lock this man up, because this man seems to be a habitual offender who can't seem to stay out of trouble. I mean, he's had some very serious charges under his belt, and it seems like it's only a matter of time before he takes someone's life if he doesn't get it together. I mean, he could have easily taken that officer's life, dragging him down the road on his car as he was hanging onto his car. He could have took Keirsten's life as he shot at Keirsten. Okay, I did some digging, and I finally found what he was sentenced to for that whole situation that went down with Keirsten. So it says, I guess he did a plea deal because prosecutors had enough evidence to convict without admitting guilt. So they filed charges against Jesse after they claimed he fought with 2 women, including an ex-girlfriend, which was Keirsten, in 2023, who was in the vehicle he was driving and who he allegedly wasn't allowed to leave as he drove the vehicle at high speeds, and he threatened to unalive them by driving into the back of a semi-truck. That would be terrifying. And then I guess he ended up serving a 120-day sentence concurrent with a probation violation related to the theft conviction. So around the same time, he pleaded guilty to a charge of felony resisting arrest after he fled from officers and had the officer hanging onto his vehicle. And then he was in possession of the firearm, which was a Smith & Wesson at the time of the stop, which they confiscated. So he was charged by a grand jury indictment for the July 2023 burglary and theft of employees' personal items and a American Express card that he had stolen from an employer. And he used the stolen card to make purchases of like $214 at a gas station. He spent a bunch of money on car washes and other things. Apparently he stole personal items that were over $1,000 in total. So he ended up pleading guilty to charges of second-degree burglary and fraudulent use of a credit card, and he was handed a suspended sentence of 120 days of shock time. So for the Keirsten thing, he got 120 days. For this whole incident, what we just went through, he got 120 days. That's crazy. No wonder this man doesn't seem to be learning his lesson, because it just seems like they give him a little pat on the wrist and give him 4 months in prison and let him out. I hope that Keirsten has a order of protection against him, because this guy sounds loco, in my opinion. But yeah, that's terrifying. And only getting 4 months after shooting at her and doing all that crazy shit, that is insane. And the fact that he continues to get in trouble after that, and they only gave him another 4 months from all those charges, that's crazy. But hopefully he's staying out of trouble now. I haven't been able to find any recent things of him from like the past year or 2. But let me know what you guys think about everything in the comments below, and thank you guys so much for watching.